Okay. How's if we've got any questions or anything, that's usually how I do these. Like I said, I'm looking at Elysium there. I've got the fleet up in game if you want to join that, but it's just kind of what you guys want to start with. So Mike, you're saying 2 weeks ago there was a system mentioned in the Fireside that all low-sec people use to store stuff. Is that a big nut to crack? I'm not sure which one you're talking about. If that was the Fireside that I did with like Kaz, that system is Amamaki. I think that's the one that you're talking about. It's got a keep star in there where they, like the low sec guys and kind of just in general, people have been selling supers and I guess titans as well. Yeah, so that system's called Amamaki. It's on the where is that one? I think it's Minmatar low sec. I can't remember exactly where that is. If you just go into either Dotland or Garpa or anything like that, you'll be able to find that. I honestly can't tell you how to spell it. It does start with an A. It's A-M something, but it's Amamaki. There you go. The the mighty put that one in there. That's how you spell it. Yeah, Hamatar. Yep, that's the system. This is an old. It's an old system in terms of Eve lore, and basically it was one of the connectors that people used to sit on the gate because it's got a direct high sec gate there. People used to sit on that gate and like smart bomb just the shit out of everybody coming into it. PL used to do this a lot. They would sit there and basically kill anybody who went into Umaki. It was their capital, kinda. Like capitals weren't a thing in low sec. They still aren't, but you can't like designate a system as a capital. And it's just one of those things that they just lived in that system for many, many years. So other than that, there's nothing like super special about it. It's just a system in the area. It's got a keep star in it that you can get stuff and do everything with. So how long have I been in Goons? That's a good question. I joined in. So I've got kind of two answers to that. Actually, in GSF itself was when I joined WeDot, and that would have been 2012 or 2013, something like that. But when I actually joined what was Deco at the time, I was in an alliance called Fatal Ascension. And so if you go from that point in time as like a year or 2 years before that. So like I've been in, we were originally called Deco, it became the CFC, we're now the Imperium. I've been in that group 15 years now. Yeah, about 15 years. Actually, in GSF itself, 12 or 13. No, Darius Johnson I knew of him, but I knew the only leader of GSF that I knew was the Mittani. I'd been playing before that. I just wasn't in, Goon Swarm. I wasn't in the CFC, wasn't in DECCO. Um, during DJ, that's what most of us called him. His formal name was Darius Johnson. He ended up being a CCP dev at one point. I can't remember what year that was. So he was around and doing things, but he was not the head of Goon Swarm for my tenure. I've only had two heads of Goon Swarm. That's Mittani and obviously currently Asher. I do know who DJ is, but he He was not. Mittens was in charge of GSF when I formally joined GSF, and he was in charge of DECCO when I was in Fatal Ascension. I was also in TNT at that point in time. Mike, the corp I was in switched between the alliances. Bombadillo lives out there? I'm not familiar with them. Mm. And he loves to feed dread, so I'm going to assume that's a single guy. Yeah, I'm not familiar with him. Somebody's on comms here with me. Would one of you guys say something? I'm looking at my recording for this, and it's doing something a little weird. I want to make sure it's actually recording audio.
Hi.
Okay, it did. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, the so Whiskey's talking about the wizard. Yeah, the wizard hat was an incident involving Mittens at FanFest in 20 something, 2014, I guess. I don't remember exactly when it was.
Yeah, one thing that surprises me is a lot of people don't realize that the silhouette of the wizard hat is in the Imperium logo.
Yeah, because we became the Imperium. I mean, we were the CFC for a really long time, but Mittens was absolutely still in charge when we rebranded into the Imperium. I don't honestly remember when that was. It's been so many, after a while here, guys, some of these dates blend together. So I joined, let me see. Let me pull up my character sheet in game. I can see exactly when I joined GSF. God, where is that information? History? But it's history. Yeah, okay. So I joined GSF in 2014. So summer 2014. In fact, it was July 11th, 2014 that I joined GSF itself. That was when I joined Wildly Inappropriate. Dot. They were called Wildly Inappropriate Dot. Before that, I was in the um, Fatal Ascension and I was in TNT back in those days. Can I talk about OTEC? I mean, I guess it depends on exactly what you mean by that. Like, I was around, I know what it was. I know a little bit of the history of it. It predates me being in any leadership capacity by quite a while. Is just talking about like the basic background on it there. So OTEC is this goes way back to Technetium. So that's what the T in OTEC stands for. And this was based on the acronym comes based on OPEC, right, which is the petroleum exporting, right, in the real world. And so this was when Technetium, or Tech, it's also just called Tech, but the formal name for it is Technetium. You could only get in a handful of areas in Eve, mostly in the north and the west, so kind of the northwest part of the map, which is where Goonswarm and a few other people were living at the time. And so this was brought together to be a control on the price of technetium. And it was literally an agreement between all of the alliances that control the regions that had the vast majority of technetium. Because at the time, moons were much more regionally locked than where they are now. And in fact, this was a response to OTEC that CCP juggled all of the moons during one of the times when they did that. They've juggled them and redone all of them in a particular, well, I shouldn't say this. It's just in a almost random period of time, but it's usually when someone is getting all of these pieces together and sorting everything out. So yeah, OTEC was all about putting a price floor on technetium. So everybody would mine it and do all that. This is also passive moon mining. So all moon mining was done by pauses and it was all passive. You put up the tower or stick, and people do had different names for those. You would put the reactors on it, you would link them all together, throw in a whole bunch of fuel into them, and walk away. And you'd basically come back and harvest them. GSOL did that. I don't know if we had GSOL as the name back then. I think so. I think it did exist back then. I met one of the heads of GSOL when I was at FanFest. I just don't remember where OTEC was compared to when I met him, to a guy named Java Junkie back many, many years ago. 2008. Okay, yeah, so it definitely existed at this point because OTEC was about the time that I was joining either Deco or into WeDot. This is a kind of mid early 2010s era, but it lasted quite a while, and it was just to create a price floor for technetium. And technetium was used at that point in time in a whole bunch of the popular T2 hulls, and so it was just in huge demand. And so they were able to set a price floor with it. TCP decided that was kind of dumb, but it was regionally locked. So the only thing they could do is they reshuffled all of the moons. It's basically how they fixed that to distribute these rarities more around everywhere instead of just in a handful of regions. So that's what OTEC was. So why did Init leave the Imperium? So after Vietnam, we had reconquered everything. We call it the Reconquista. That's when we took back all of our space in Delve, in Fountain, in Quirius, right? We basically just came back to everything that was ours. Asher had taken over from Mittens at this point in time, and then Init, who were never really super thrilled to be in the Imperium. They were always kind of a do their own thing. They're mercenaries by their background, right? They didn't really like being in a coalition like that. And it just got to the point where Darkshines came to Asher and was just like, we're just going to go our own ways. And that's pretty much how that came down. It wasn't a surprise to us. There was a lot of conversations back and forth between uh, Goon leadership and the autocrats in the Imperium, which is the senior leader of every alliance. So, right, the autocrat is just the person at the top. They all put into a channel together, and we literally just call it the autocrats. And so they're all talking, all those kind of pieces. So Sister Bliss was a big member in it. I don't know that he founded in it with it. I do know that he ran in it for a long time before Darkshines. I just don't know who actually founded in it. It could have been Sister Bliss. I didn't really know in it before they joined the Imperium. That happened 2018, I guess. I think that sounds about right when they joined the Imperium or something like that. So why has Init grown so much? They've absorbed a couple of groups when Horde died, if you guys remember that, which is a weird thing to say, but we have had people join us since then. If you remember the 5th of November Horde collapse, they ended up in Init, the main corp that more or less split off from the Horde Alliance, went to Init. Uh, and so they got a whole bunch of members from that. When other groups, they have been recruiting, it's not like Init doesn't do that. just like we do, just like Frat does, just like everybody else does. So they have grown quite a bit. They're uh, they're definitely a full block power. Uh, they weren't when they left the Imperium, but they pretty much are now. I don't think too many people would argue that they're not a full block power. So realistically, you could say that Eve right now has 3 blocks. You have the Imperium, you have Winterco, which is headed by Frat, and you have Init. Why did Bastion close its doors? Carneros was getting just a little burned out from trying to run everything, so they ended up doing what most people call a WeDot, and so the Bastion Alliance compressed into a single corp called the Night Watchman, and that corp is now part of GSF. So I talk with Caneros on a pretty regular basis.
Great guy.
Hey, Lorraine. So Caneros runs Mini True, so he's an Ilum director. I talk with him pretty regularly. He was passing through. Caneros was. He was passing through my hometown. I want to say a year ago. So I actually got a chance to meet him. We had dinner. We do a big meetup in my hometown about every month. So I got a chance to meet him. Um, That wasn't actually the first time I met him. I've actually met him in Vegas right after COVID, when the first uh, Dune, right, of the new trilogy, whose director I cannot pronounce his name, but when the first of those new Dune trilogies came out, we got to see it. Carnell's actually rented out a 60-person movie theater in Vegas, and so we all went to see it opening weekend. It was pretty fucking cool. I won't deny that. That was a cool thing. It's the first time I met Caneros. What was the long-term alliance that left? Yeah, Lon was the most recent one. That was I don't remember when they left now, but like of all of them who have we dotted or left to do their own thing, right? Anything like that, Lon was the most recent one. Do I wait? Do you think after Horde is gone, there'll be a new power block coming up? So for right now, the answer is no. There's 3 blocks. Like I said, there's us, right? So there's the Imperium, there's Winterco, and there's Init. And Init is in a coalition block power size. They don't really have a coalition the same way, just because that's kind of not the way that Init does things. Their organization is just different, but they are large enough, they're capable enough, right? So they're in that same power level, even though they're not technically a coalition. We had hoped to see a new coalition coalesce. Well, that's an unfortunate way to phrase that, right? We had hoped to see that fourth power block, we'll say it that way, coalesce in the drone lands. And unfortunately, that hasn't really happened yet. It's been 8 or 9 months, depending on how you want to count that. Right? Remember, Horde collapsed the 5th of November. So you could say by early December, their stuff was gone, right? We spent a couple of weeks burning the drones down. And then we made our publication. Asher made that of, hey, we're not going to go into the drones. We're not going to deal with it. We're not going to mess with it. You can move in there. We put a couple of keep stars down to allow for, we call these the free ports, to allow for logistics into the drones. Norris, who's head of Frat, right, head of FRT, who runs Winterco, signed off on that plan as well and said, hey, we're not going to do it either. And we had hoped a fourth block would coalesce there, and it just has not. It's very balkanized. For if you look at the SOV map on Dotland or on Garpa, wherever you get your SOV map from, there's a whole bunch of little guys in there that are fairly fighting each other, but they haven't coalesced into the block like we kind of assumed that they would. It just hasn't happened. Oh, Whiskey, that's a good question there. So, based on how things have gone in the game historically, how likely do you think it is for an additional power, right, to emerge in the current landscape? And that's what we had hoped to happen in the drones. It didn't. With the proposed changes that CCP put out on their blog on Friday, I probably not. We're probably going to be left with a tripolar kind of world for right now. We'll have to see. So what was my progress to my current role? Um, so I started as a line guy, as everybody does. I was an FC, kinda. I never progressed in the FC level. The highest I ever got was a skirmish commander, right, which is of course the lowest ranking FC. That's as far as I ever got. Because I made a lateral move within our military org into recon. And so I ended up doing by far more recon work. So I've worked with all of our block level FCs. I joined recon after BTAC-R, and so it was a year or something after BTAC-R that I joined recon. So kind of the late 2010s, I was mid to late 2010s, I was in recon. Did all those kind of pieces. I was named chair of classes at the time for university. So I ended up running all of the classes in university. I wrote almost all of them. Not the current versions, but the old versions. I wrote basically all of those myself. I was an instructor, right? Ran the classes itself. There was another guy who ran the handouts. There was another guy who was uh, doing like the skill book packs and doing all those kind of pieces. There was a couple of us at the time. Robbie, for those of you in KF who know Robbie, he's usually chiming in on like the uh, channel, the help channels and everything like that. So Robbie was head of university at the time. I was named chair of classes as we get up to, so I was recon and I was chair of classes, and I was doing a couple other things as well. Up to 2020 when we get word of this big invasion coming at us. This what became what we call Vietnam. Most of Eve calls it World War B or World War B2. There's a couple of different names for it. We call it Vietnam. That's right where we got compressed into all of our space down to 7 systems. It was literally one constellation around 1DQ. Leading up to that, so the summer of 2020, so we started to get word that something was going down the kind of late spring of 2020. Over the summer, it was clear an invasion was coming. In classic Goon fashion, I was grabbed one day by Asher, who reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you help me with a project?" I said yes, because I'm an idiot. And I jump into Mumble, and then I see it's him and Mitten sitting in a channel. I'm like, this is not good. This is not good. And I was right. But I was asked then to create a group called Procurement, and that uh, ended up being an Ilum level directorship. I was also made a finance director at that point in time. I kept those roles for about 2 years until Asher took over from the Matani. And about 6 months after that, or maybe a year, I can't remember the time frame on it, about six to 12 months after Asher took over, I was named chief of staff, and that's the primary role that I occupy today. Uh, I've got a lot of hats just because of what I've done in the past and these various roles, but that's kind of the sequence to it. Do I have more hats than Llama? Uh, yes, I do. Um, Mostly because Llama has been put into a very special category. He has been rat knighted. That's what we call it. So Rat Knight was a former director, so really, really good guy. He was my uh, second in procurement. I was named head of procurement, and I immediately turned right around and grabbed Rat Knight and said, "Hey, I need your help with a project." He also was an idiot and said, "Okay." Um, Hopped into Mumble and he sees me and Asher and Mitten sitting in a channel, and he literally writes to me on Discord. So we were on Mumble, but he literally writes to me in Discord where I had poked him. Uh, WTF? What have you done to me? So he became my second in procurement. He was elevated to the directorship as well, and he was one of those people who was really good to have around, but he burned himself out by taking on too many roles. So he had too many hats. And when he eventually retired because he had a whole bunch of IRL work to do, I'm not gonna tell you guys what he does, but he was working like 3 real jobs because his company was not hiring help for him and he just couldn't do it. And so it became a verb within the directorate, which is still used today, that people who have too many roles or as many as we think they can handle, we call them being rat knighted. And that means that no one else in the directorate is allowed to give this person any more roles, more or less without clearing it by me. And so far, I have never done that where somebody's come to me and said, "Hey, we rat knighted this person and now we want to give them more roles." And I usually tell them no. It's like, why? Or they've got to drop something, right? So can, this person do more work? Sure, if you can get them to give up something else. Dave, can you have roles? No. Press the Euros, Dave. You know this.
I think I'd probably be a prime example of tries to do too much half the time.
Yeah. Somebody else this question there. With the new ANSI meta, will the best base for holding be drones with how dense it is? It's a that's a good question. We honestly don't know the answer to that for the simple reason that we have no details, we have no numbers, we don't know what any of this stuff is actually going to look like. So, where is it going to end up in the future? Not a clue. We won't know until CCP gives us actual data. We've got a whole bunch of nerds together who have been meeting almost since the dev blog came out on Friday. Remember, guys, it's like 48 hours. I can't remember when they released that blog, but it's like 49 or 50 hours ago. We had a lot of meetings on Friday night. We had a lot of them yesterday talking about different thoughts and future plans of what might happen. But until we get actual numbers, we don't know. Um, it's like everybody's asking questions, Elysium. That's fine. Let me see. There was another one. How is procurement different than GSOL? That's a good question. So GSOL is responsible for maintaining all of our infrastructure. So citadels, jump bridges, they run the Sky Mules program to get the stuff that we use for the shubs, for ratting upgrades, for mining upgrades, for all of that kind of stuff. That's what GSOL does. Procurement's role is to have doctrine ships ready to go before you guys even know that the doctrine exists. So procurement is one of the smallest of the orgs. It's not the smallest, but it's one of the smallest of the orgs. Um, it's a very, very small group of highly, what's a polite way of saying this? Highly competent, and maybe not, they're all idiots. They agree to do it. They're just huge fucking industry nerds, but there's just a very small number of them. And they're basically handpicked. We don't do open recruiting for procurement. Um, every now and then we'll do something in channels that most of y'all can't see, and we'll say, "Hey, we're looking to expand," and then people will put forth names, and the vast majority of people get filtered out. So only a handful of people ever join procurement. Yeah, shameless plug. Sky Mules is, I'm sure, looking for people. They're always needing goons to go out and do that. It's a pretty thankless job, as most jobs are in that kind of thing of going out and picking up the reagents, going out and picking up the ice that allows us to run all of our SOV upgrades. Sitting, I like that. Sanctioned insider trading. Dude, you're not totally wrong there, but you kind of are. There's a limit to how much we tell even the procurement guys, even though it's a highly guarded group. It's their background checks are pretty high to get into that group, so they'll know doctrines are coming before almost anyone else. But it's something that it's all about building it. So we put very specific limits onto what their profit margins are for things that they do for procurement. Jojo, so this is a good question. This comes up every time CCP tries to nerf bat us. Um, I was talking with the SCs earlier at the meeting. I was talking to the CEOs and corp directors at Kremlin earlier. I think Asher actually mentioned this yesterday at the fireside. We've been talking about this, right? CCP has a tendency to try to nerf bat us into the ground. And every time, just like a nerf bat, they whiff it. And they nerf bat the entire game, and we sit there and go, all right, cool. Our organization, our brain trust is sufficient that doesn't really bother us. It can be annoying. Don't get me wrong. That that can be annoying with some of the things that they've done over the years. Usually, the question now generally pops in of like how many times I tried to nerf bat goons specifically. I don't know what the number is. Depends on how you want to count like attempts at nerf batting an Ansiblex change, which is the big one for that dev blog. There's been 3 or 4 of those, depending on how you want to count them. This is either third or fourth one that is kind of directly targeted. They'll say it's at all of nullsec, but they're targeting us, and it hasn't worked. It's just made it so. The question was asked earlier, right? Can we get new people into like a new block with it? Not with these Ansiblex changes. They have pretty much locked the tripolar Eve nullsec powers with this change. And it just has to do with how SOV works. The power and workforce that the vast majority of guys never have to deal with. That's what a lot of our GSOL guys do, and our higher planning guys sit down and plan all this shit out. It's why there are certain upgrades in certain systems. All of that stuff is based on the power and workforce that ties into all the SOV thing. Distinct from the Sky Mules thing I was talking about earlier, but it is run. They introduced them at the same time. Yeah, more or less. I think the Skyhooks came a little bit later, but they were kind of introduced at the same time. But those changes have made it so that small groups, which is what CSB keeps talking about, simply cannot exist in nullsec. You can't control enough territory to work all of these pieces and be as small as CCP wants, because they really want us to be tall rather than wide in an economic sense, and it's just not possible. These mechanics require you to be wide rather than tall. And goons do really well at being wide. Yeah, and if you think that is a fat goon bee pun, you're absolutely correct. Joshua, I see your follow-up thing there. Asher said this yesterday as well on the fireside that if there's 10 people playing Eve, 6 of them are going to be goons, and the other 4 are going to be complaining about how goons are terrible. Yeah, I mean that's just kind of the way it is. They have tried this since I've been in GSF to nerf bat us for any number of different reasons, and every time it fails. Oh, I missed your last line. I like that. No one's writing books about the great small gangs of Lowsec. Yeah, I like that. That's pretty good. Mike, yeah, so it's you can't know people who read the rule book better. I get what you're saying on there. Our thing is that every time they change something with it, because there are so many of us, right? There's thousands and thousands and thousands of us, not just in Goons, but in the Imperium, right? There's just thousands upon thousands of us. That our knowledge of Eve mechanics just exceeds CCP's because there's just so many of us. Um, in fact, I was asking one of the groups, I can't remember again if it was Kremlin or the FC meeting earlier today. It's like, does anybody know a CCP dev who has been there for the last 15 years? I got nothing. The only one I can think of is Hilmar. All of the others are
Burger.
new. Is Burger still there? Okay.
Yeah.
It's two out of a company that employs a couple of hundred people. I'm sure you'll find more, but like there's a handful of them. Uh, I've been playing Eve since 2009. I've been in GSF and the Imperium and doing all that stuff since 2013. I've been in Nullsec since about 2011. I was in a small, tiny little alliance back then. Actually, coincidentally, lived in the Dronelands. Lived out in Owasso. Um, you know, that's just my own history to it. When do CCP employees receive their sword? Is it after 10 years? I think it is after 10 years. I'm not sure they actually still do that. I honestly don't know. They used to, and it was
They
some
do.
number. Do they still do that, Sultan?
Yeah. Because they had a big thing at not this year's FanFest, but the one prior. They had a big unveiling.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's something like that. Is it 10 years? Something that you know off the top of your head?
I think it's that.
Let's go with yes because he and so we're both like, sure, it's something like that. Fozzie should be coming up on his 10 years here pretty soon. Can't remember when he joined.
It's like the only time I've seen Hilmar like actually smile with glee is when he got to hold his giant broadsword and they were smashing, I think it was watermelons on stage with their swords.
Yeah, yeah, I do think it was watermelons. Yeah, yeah.
It was very Gallagher.
You know, I almost said that, but I'm like, I don't want to sound old that I actually know who he is and have seen him. So you did it for me, Sultan. I appreciate that.
Hey, I'm here for you.
If you guys don't know who Gallagher is, he's a I'm not sure I'd call him a comedian, but he did that. But he was an entertainer back in like the 80s. He was huge, and he had this big ass fucking hammer mallet thing, and he would just smush specifically watermelons on stage. And so the first like 10 or 15 rows of people in his audience all had these plastic tarps, or they were just an idiot because he would just smash shit on stage and spray the audience with stuff. If you want to just chuckle to yourself of like, yeah, Sledge-O-Matic, yeah, it's actually what it's called. There's somebody else who admits they're an old bastard. Yeah, you want to just YouTube. I bet if you YouTube Sledge-O-Matic, you'd pull that up from those things. But yeah, 80s, maybe early 90s. Can't remember when he kind of retired like that. But yeah, he just had this huge ass mallet, and they would just bring out stuff, and he would just smush them. Okay, let me see if I missed any questions here.
Ranger, for the new guys, can you explain how the various levels of like LM and then Kremlin and all that stuff works and what it is?
Sure. So basically, what we have is that's a good point. I mentioned Kremlin earlier without really defining what that is. So we have the alliance directors. So these people are in Ilum or Illuminati. Most of which just call it Ilum, but the formal name is Illuminati. And these are the alliance directors. So when you go and look at the Ask a Director forum, right, literally on the forums, and it says, hey, I need to speak to somebody about some kind of an issue, who's running it? Those are the Ilum directors. So those are the alliance directors themselves. And there's about 60 in total. Kremlin is kind of like a parallel, which is member corp CEOs and member corp full directors. And then there's a handful of snowflake people tossed into there who are not corp CEOs, are not in-game corp directors, but have roles that should be in there to be able to talk with other people from different corporations. And so that's what Kremlin is. So there is overlap between Ilum and Kremlin because some of the Ilum members are themselves either CEOs of their member corp or full directors in their member corp. Classic example of this would be Apple Pear, who is a member corp CEO, so he's in Kremlin, but he's also head of the Black Hand, so he's in Ilum. And so there are some overlap with that. There's about a dozen people between Ilum that would fall into Kremlin as well because they're either member corp CEOs or member corp directors. But that's the difference between the two. So we have Ilum meetings every week right before the fireside, and we have Kremlin meetings basically every other week, actually on Sundays.
And how does the Sky team fit into that?
So Sky Team is the so it's composed of multiple orgs, people from multiple orgs like Cord, Recon, GSOL. It's high level directors generally in those groups who get together, and they're the ones who are given an objective. Like let's take the Geminate invasion that we did not too long ago. We say, okay, we want to invade Geminate, and we go to Sky Team and we say we want to invade Geminate. Where are we going to stage? What's the attack vectors? What are we going to try and hit? What's the ranges for things? Do we bring caps? Do we bring supers? Do we bring titans? What are we doing? So Sky Team's involved in strategic planning of an objective like that. So they're told, hey, we're going to invade Geminate. Sky Team is like, okay. They'll name a campaign commander for the Geminate operation. It was Killer. So Killer he's in Sky Team, but he was named the campaign commander. So he decided when an objective would be hit. So if we want to take Sov in a system, are we going to do that, or are we going to attack this Citadel? Or do we do both and try and pull their attention away, right? The allocation of resources. So that's what Sky Team does. So they pull from, it's not an org per se, it's a collection of high level directors from multiple orgs. The class ones you would think of, the military, obviously, Cord, GSOL, Recon. Those are big guys in Sky Team. Okay, take a drink of water and then wait if anybody has any additional questions or story time. Okay, just double checked, and I have actually gone through every question I think there in Elysium. So if I missed your question, Elysium, just say it again because clearly I missed it. Joshua, I see that you mentioned Sam. You remember Sinbad? I loved him. He was contemporaneous to Gallagher. Actually, I think he was a little bit later than Gallagher, but they had some pretty good overlap.
I think the original Gallagher died, and then like his brother took it over for a bunch of years.
I have to admit, I do not remember that, but that is very possible. Yeah, I remember Sinbad more of a 90s kind of a guy. I personally found him quite hilarious. I really liked him. I was too young really to go to like any of his shows or anything, but I've seen him on TV. They did, uh, the broadcasts and everything, and I'm sure if you Google Sinbad, you find his stuff. Yeah, he was definitely a '90s thing. I can tell you when it really started, but I remember him from the '90s myself. Okay, I'll leave you with this because I saw this picture the other day and it pissed me off. Um, it was meme, classic meme that said, in 4 years the '90s will be, or sorry, the '80s will be 50 years ago. And I was like, get fucked, man.
I literally feel that in my bones.
I know, right? Old age is making you feel old. It's a really funny thing with Eve, and this has been the way pretty much since the beginning. Because this is such a complex environment, such a complex game to do, uh, the average Eve player is quite a bit older than you would assume for a an MMO or anything like that. Not everybody, obviously, but it's actually quite a bit higher than you might think. We've got some young people as well, of course, but most of us are. You see a lot of people when you ask them, how do we do these kind of setups? Who's got college degrees or have served in the military, former military? We have tons of them. It's just something that you see so much within our own actual military in GSF and in the Imperium and around Eve is full of either current or former, IRL military members. And so it's when you listen to it, you will hear them use phrases that any military member goes, "Oh, you picked that up from the army, or you picked that up over here." It's just a way of speaking. And you see that a lot. The corp leadership, corp directors, Ilum. Yeah, we're all. I think we did a poll in Ilum one day to find out who the youngest person was, and I think they were 23. And we were all like, fucking child, get out. It's just most of us are in our 30s or 40s, and that's pretty typical. I honestly don't remember what the survey number was there, Conrad. Mid 30s doesn't surprise me. I think it was slightly towards upper 30s, like mid upper, like 36, 37 or something like that. But I honestly don't remember that number for sure. But it's interesting that that number hasn't changed a huge amount. It's gone up a little bit, but we get, people retiring who win Eve, right? And so they're not around. We get new players coming in, but it's still quite a bit uh, higher in that sense. You would normally think of a game like this as having a, late teens, early 20s, or even mid 20s kind of age group. And that's never really been Eve. That's just not really been a thing. Yeah, we do have people who are in their teens as well. It's not okay. So technically, when you sign up for Eve, the EULA says that you have to be, and I don't remember what the number is. Anybody created a character recently? It's like it's in there. It's buried in there that you've got to be a certain age to actually play Eve, and I think it's 17. Right, because they're in Europe. It's all Europe kind of law stuff. I don't remember what that number is. Um, we know that there have been people who have been quite a bit younger than that when they've started. Um, but most of us are either in college or have graduated, served in the military, gotten out, working a job, doing all that kind of thing. It's just a slightly older. 14 seems low to me, but I have to admit I haven't created a new account or anything like that in a long time to actually read the EULA again. I thought it was like 16 or 17. Because I remember when Mike Flood first joined us, and he was under that age, and he was like 14 or 15 at the time.
Mifune was pretty young too.
Sorry, who was that? Something?
Mifune.
It could be. I always think of Mike Flood because it was always, uh, he was the
His
FC in
birthday.
person. Yeah, it was always the, happy birthday, Mike. Oh, between 13 and 17 need parental approval. Interesting. That did not used to be in there. I wonder when they added that. Used to be you have to, not and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Eve's also been a very heavily male dominated game. We're not sure exactly what the numbers are. CCP's own numbers are usually 90+% male, but they do that based on the name of the account, like the credit card that pays for it. So, what the actual ratio is of men to women, we don't know. CCP's number, the last one I saw, and this was many years ago, was like 94% male, something like that. Joshua, I like that. It's funny the game this old would have a devoted player base since, most new games start big and then fall off and die. Yeah, and the old Eve learning cliff, you don't see that picture linked nearly as much as you used to. Um, but that was a big absolute thing, was the old learning cliff. And it was completely accurate. It's why we created what would become University. It wasn't called that originally. But it's why we created what was University. It's why we've got training corps. Why a lot of our big corps have specific training groups to them. There's any number of them in our group that do, and it's just a setup to where it's like, here, let's teach you how to do this, so that learning cliff isn't so bad. CSB's tried to revamp the NPE, the new player experience. I don't know how many times. I swear to God, they do it like every other year. So I'll just link the picture there. See if that's the right picture. Oh yeah, that's the picture.
What the hell was POTBS? I honestly can't remember what that was.
I
For
don't
a game?
remember. Yeah, I don't remember that one either. Pirate Pirates of the Burning Seas. I don't even recognize that name. I started my MMO journey on one called Ultimate Online in the 90s.
Well, that's what Eve was a copy of originally.
There's a lot of similar mechanics to that, yeah. I remember I was working in retail, I was working in our warehouse. We had a freight day, and I'd been playing Ultimate like the night before or something. And I was going around killing eagles to get feathers to make arrows, and I mentioned it in the back, and one of my coworkers like, "You're killing eagles," and they were just about ready to report me, because that's a federal crime in the U.S. It's like in this game, they're like, "Oh, okay." All right, so we've been going right about an hour now. I was trying to keep these to an hour to 90 minutes. So, we won't cut you off if you guys have any more questions there. But shameless plug, I did put a how to fighters class will be on Friday. Sorry, not Friday, Wednesday for Euros. I think I set it at 1900. And for US, I set it at 0001 just to make sure that the calendar didn't do something weird. So if you interested in doing a how-to fighters for your carrier, we were asked about this actually yesterday on the fireside, and I said I'd put those up. So I did post those this morning. So those will be on Wednesday. Yeah, if you guys have any more questions, we'll absolutely do that. Otherwise, we'll cut a little bit of a earlier day. This is a little bit later than I wanted to because I'll be honest, I screwed up the time and I forgot when Kremlin was, and I added an extra hour after it. So yeah, it happens. Yeah, of course, guys. All right, you guys go enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Reminder that beginning this coming Saturday, the fireside will be a few hours later. We decided to shift it to, oh my God, what time did we decide to shift it to? I think 2300 Eve. So it will be later for the next couple of months for summer. And on that note, you guys enjoy your Sunday. I will post these as I have been doing. So yeah, we know that's going to be an issue. It's one of those kind of times that when we've literally got people around the world, and we absolutely do. We have people in like every time zone. You can't pick a time that's good for everybody. Uh, we wish we have the same problem with the directorate. We have the same problem with Kremlin. We got to pick a time to get as many people as possible. We'll be doing it for just a couple months over the summer, and then we'll shift back for it. So, besides, as is our standard tagline that I'll leave you all with, right? Oppress the Euros. And on that note, you guys have a good day. We'll talk with you all later.